this is OTG welcoming you back to Harmony Within, a series dedicated to the off-the-grid conversations about spiritual wellness, recovery, and the deeper truths you don't hear spoken very often. In our last session, we spoke about step 4, and we learned that the power of facing ourselves without flinching is attainable. We searched our resentments, our fears, our harms to others, and all the patterns we wove them together with in relationships. That truth wasn't there to crush us. As I'd spoken about truth before, it was there to set us free. If you answered your step 4 inventory with honesty, you now hold something powerful, a map to your inner world. And these answers are more than reflections. They are keys to your healing. You will use these later, especially when you get to step 9. But today, we move into step 5, which is we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. This is the moment when we take the deep inner work of step 4 and turn it into connection, humility, and transformation. For me, it was very difficult to admit not only my flaws to myself, but to have somebody there with me and to pray to God with somebody was a very humbling experience for me. It was kind of terrifying. And step 5 can feel kind of terrifying for many of us. Why? Well, because secrets are uncomfortable. Even when they're killing us, the thought of looking another person in the eyes and saying out loud the things we swore that no one would ever know, it feels like walking into a storm without a shelter. You know, I get that. I totally was very humbled by that experience, but it was very real for me. So my advice is just let it be real. It's one of those things to write down the truth in step 4. It's another thing entirely to speak about it. And speaking in a way is what makes it real, you know, in a way that the ink never can. So when you're reading your black part to your sponsor and discussing it, you're not only just labeling it, you're defining it. And so that is what you're going to pray about. And that is, you know, a very personal thing. It'll bring you closer to your sponsor because you're giving away very close guarded things to you, you know. And in a way, if you can imagine you have a wound that you've kept bandaged for years and you never let air or light or anything touch it, step 4 was peeling away the wrapping of that, and step 5 is holding it up to the light and saying to someone, here it is, this is where it hurts, which is the first step to having it healed. It takes courage, and it takes trust, and it takes a willingness to risk being seen exactly as you are. And to me, that was the ultimate mirror. It scared the hell out of me. But I had a very good sponsor. This entire series is dedicated to him, Nuclear Charlie. Without him, I wouldn't have the information that I'm conveying to you now. And he never made me feel judged. And I think that was one of the most important things. The only time I ever felt judged by him was in a dynamic where he was making it very obvious that my ego was sticking out. And that was his way of letting me know. He had a very simple but powerful way of communicating with me that wasn't always just verbal, but also very kinetic. Just the rhetoric of what his behavior was like a mirror, and he would show me myself. And I am very grateful to have someone who could do that for me, and that's the importance of a sponsor. They're the ones who are going to go through step 4 and 5 with you. You know, as you take God's hand, they take yours. And so, you know, step 4 kind of flows seamlessly into step 5. You make your inventory in step 4, not to be a private diary that you hide forever. It's preparation. It was the raw material for the real spiritual shift that begins in step 5. Step 4 revealed the patterns. Step 5 invites us to own them aloud. You know, step 4 dug for truth, and step 5 confirms that with another witness. You know, so it's a very spiritual act. And spiritually, the act of speaking truth is powerful because it brings our hidden life into the open, into the relationship with God, ourselves, and another person. It's no longer a secret in the dark, and in spiritual terms, anything brought into the light loses much of its power. It's the power of that truth I was talking about before I started the steps. And I think that is the most important time for that truth really, really, really to be honed. The steps are seamless. And if you do them correctly, 4 will spit you out on 5, where you're now going through an inventory to make the 3 admissions to God, to ourselves, and to another human being. So let's break down that 3 admissions in step 5. What does it mean to admit before God? Well, this is your spiritual honesty. You're no longer making excuses. You're placing the truth in God's presence. For some, this is prayer, before or after the talk with your sponsor. For others, it's a silent understanding, that God, here it is, all of it. And it fosters your belief, and belief is faith. And that is very important to this process, to this step, to all the steps, because faith is what we're trying to develop. So to ourselves, the second part of the 3 admissions, we're admitting that we were wrong, and that we're sorry, and that we want to make changes to clear us of those maladies. So you'd think we already knew our own wrongs, but denial runs deep in many situations, and that is what your biggest enemy to honesty is the denial and the excuses. So when you're saying them out loud to another person, that forces you to hear your own voice speak that truth. That breaks your self-deception. It crystallizes the truth. So the to another human being element, your sponsor, the person you choose to listen to your truth. This is where humility grows. We accept that we're not above the need for help. We trust another person to see us without turning away. And for many, this is how a bridge is built between having trust in another human being, something tangible and visible, to having faith in a higher power. Because you start seeing that higher power working through your sponsor. When I would look at Charlie and I would talk to Charlie, Nuclear Charlie was Nuclear Charlie. But when he is in a meeting, he has a little preamble to all of his shares that gives thanks to the program and to God, and humbly admits that he would not have this day of sobriety without it. And then he goes and starts speaking. And when he speaks, his body is still Nuclear Charlie, but the words coming out of his mouth are something higher. And because of his many years of experience doing this, he has this unique way of just opening his mouth and truth comes out. Truth that makes people in the meetings, I've noticed, put their hands on their stomachs. Or they'll take a deep breath. And there's always somebody in the room who comments on his share and how something struck him. So there is definitely value to another human being who has had a relationship with their higher power that functions, and you see that. And they can show you how they connect. But they also urge you, as Charlie did with me, to make your own connection. And that was so important before he did these steps with me, when he made me get out a piece of paper and write down what my God does, how it will function for me. And I breathed life into it through him by watching what he did and putting myself in a perspective where I can see through his eyes. And he was very easy in allowing that. He has a talent for that. And so I was very lucky, and I'm so grateful for him. And he guided me through and gave me a spiritual perspective. And that perspective was at step 5, is an act of surrender. And it's not to weakness, but to that truth. It's a spiritual cleansing. In many faith traditions, confession is seen as a way to wash the soul. Growing up Catholic and Christian, there was a lot of confession in the Catholic religion, and a lot of confessing in getting saved, to restore alignment with God. And, it's the same here. This is a cleansing. We're surrendering and giving up the dirt and being washed clean by the forgiveness that we are given by our sponsors, by our fellowship, and by our higher power, and then ultimately ourselves, to leave the darkness behind. And when we speak of our wrongs, we release that shame that's been poisoning our spirits. We experience grace from another person who listens without judgment. We open a channel for God's forgiveness, or your own personal higher self's forgiveness, or whatever your higher power is that generates your faith to flow. Not in an abstract idea, but as something felt deep in the bones. When you open that channel and you feel heard, you inherit a joy. Some people call it the pink cloud, where you just feel liberated. So you gain back some of the things that you lost. The gifts that Step 5 gives back are profound. And by completing Step 5, you regain 3 things that your addiction stole from you. The first one is your integrity. You no longer have to pretend to be someone you're not. You can be comfortable with your own flaws because you acknowledge them and you're working on them. Integrity is a big gift. You're right with yourself. And with that integrity comes the second gift, which is freedom. Secrets keep us in chains. They feed that thing I call the ick. That just negative cloud that hangs over you. Sometimes it's there when you wake up. Sometimes it's there when something reminds you of something. But it's shame. It's guilt. A subliminal form of it. And this releases the secrets that sometimes trigger that. Speaking them breaks those chains. Just like if you are having a bad day and you tell someone, I am having a bad day. You're not only forewarning them, but you're also inviting yourself to align. And that's connection. And connection is the third gift you get back. You realize you're not the only one. You're just another bozo on the bus, and it's fine to sit down and get taken somewhere nice, good destination. Another human being has heard it all and stands with you. And 9 times out of 10, anybody in an AA room could stand with you. Because the disease may hit us differently, but the patterns are the same. And this sets us free. For an example, I once knew a man who in his 5th step admitted to his sponsor a betrayal he'd hidden for 20 years. He expected disgust. But instead, his sponsor looked at him and said, I've done worse, you're forgiven. That moment lifted a weight so heavy that he said it felt like breathing for the first time in decades. And that was told to me by a fellow sponsee of my same sponsor. And they are also extremely helpful if your sponsor has other sponsees. I call them sponsorship brothers or sisters. And they can also give you tips, And one of the tips that I was given was to choose wisely who you speak to, which just confirmed that I had the right sponsor. And some people choose to speak to clergy members, and that's fine. Or another trusted person in recovery. But a sponsor is aligned with guiding you through the steps, But if you have a hard time finding a sponsor, you definitely can complete Step 5 with those other alternatives. You just have to be thorough. Don't leave anything out because it's uncomfortable. Half measures will leave you restless. And as Charlie used to say, half measures avail us nothing, not even half. And I used to love it when he would say that, But one thing I do notice is that the really successful people pray before and after. It aligns you spiritually. It opens you. It humbles the ego. And because I was honest about not knowing whether I could be honest, asking God for honesty was what I did before I did my steps with Charlie, based on his recommendation. He would pray with me. It made me feel comfortable doing it, because he's doing it with me. And he wasn't scared to show me his humility and his emotion. Sometimes when he was praying really hard, he'd break down in tears. And that's powerful when you're witnessing someone who has everything, lost it and then regained it again, and has this wonderful life, all these talents, and to see him cry when he prays for, God's knowledge, for his will for him and the power to carry it out, and then laments upon his gratitude. His gratitude's just was almost a religious experience, or a spiritual experience, I'll say, just watching. It really showed me the power of faith. And so confidentiality is also very important, because the person you share with should be someone who understands the sacred trust of this step. And for my sponsor to show me the most vulnerable part of himself in prayer, that's sacred to me. Nobody needs to know about my intimate moments, those powerful things I keep to myself. I myself sometimes cry because it was so moving and touching that I reflect on that, and I wanted that. I wanted to feel that, because that to me is the epitome of feeling alive when you're living in that joyful, tearful moment. And it's such a relief, and I can totally understand what he was feeling now. Even when I was watching it back then, you see somebody cry, you can feel their pain to a certain degree. I wanted to feel what he was feeling, And you'll get that. If you do step 5 correctly, you will get that. A profound sense of relief, as though you've dropped a heavy bag you didn't realize you were carrying. It's a strange calm, like your inner waters are settling for the first time in years. And you may notice this in step 4. The list no longer feels like a shameful record, but a closed chapter. And you've owned it. And it has less power over you. And it prepares you for the honesty needed in step 6, which I'll get into how step 5 drops you off on its doorstep. You've faced the truth. You've spoken it. You survived it. And now you're ready for step 6, which is to become entirely ready for God to remove the defects you have exposed. And you're riding on that pink cloud, and you're ready to give it away. If you remember in step 4 how I talked about how my inventory turned into a fun Easter egg hunt, this is kind of like an extension of that, because now you're like, look what I found. This is all me. I can remove these things. And so you're kind of stoked. My pink cloud was the motivation that pushed me forward through becoming entirely ready to remove the defects I've exposed. Because I felt clean. I wanted to stay clean. Step 6 is part of what I call the Trinity steps, 3, 6, and 9. 3 affirms that you're willing to take the hand of help from a spiritual level. 6 is where you're proving it. You're saying, I'm willing to clean my side of the street and keep it clean, which means that not only are you purging yourself of all of the things that you've seen in your past, you're acknowledging that you're clean in the present, and you are pushing into the future without fear or shame, but with hope. I'm going to keep my world clean. I'm not going to dirty my side of the street. Every instance where my ego wants to run forward and say, oh, you disrespected, I'm going to say, no, I don't feel disrespected. I feel accepting of the fact that this person is imperfect and is somewhat feral to the spiritual concept that I now possess. It's a way of keeping yourself from being too mutable to the energies around you. It's part of the protection that prayer gives you. It's part of the safe and protected aspect of following a program of recovery. And it is the space that you create between you and the world. And that bufferage is your higher power. So to become entirely ready for God to remove the defects you've exposed, you have to have a good knowledge of what exactly they are and what they look like and how to see yourself coming. Because step 5 is like walking into a room you've kept locked for years, cleaning out all the rot and then realizing this space could be beautiful if I let God rebuild it, or whatever your spiritual axiom is. And step 6 is a decision to hand the blueprint over. To say, here is what I want to look like. Because for everything that you banish, you're replacing. If you are purging yourself of dishonesty, then honesty is what you gain. If you are giving up your unstable mood swings, or you're going to try to stabilize that, you're going to inherit stability. So step 5 is empty. If you don't do 4. And unfortunately, if you don't do 4, you can't do 5, you can't do 6, because how can you ask God to remove defects that you haven't fully faced or acknowledged? So that's another important reason why the steps are vital to recovery, is because of the process they force yourself to look at. It is a safety mechanism that wheedles out denial. So if step 4 was the excavation, step 5 is the unveiling, and in unveiling, you don't just reveal what's broken, you reveal the courage it takes to stand in your truth. The truth that I've told you will set you free, especially the more detailed it is. Charlie had a saying that he used to tell me, and it was, people with fringe efforts in sobriety will have fringe sobriety. If you go all in and you're thorough, you will have all in and thorough sobriety. And that really, I think goes to the reason why I did a whole first episode on truth. Because this is where the rubber meets the road. You reveal the courage it takes to stand in your truth. You walk into step 5, burdened by shame. You walk out lighter, more connected, more honest than you've been in years. And as you leave, the door to step 6 swings open, inviting you to a deeper surrender. The surrender that says, now I've faced who I've been. I'm ready to become who I was meant to be. Thank you for listening. This is OTG, the Harmony Within series, and that was step 5. I'll see you next time in step 6. Have a good one and be blessed.